listen to a soft cry. No, I got you. This morning we light our chalice with two Rumi quatrains and a poem from Shams of Tabriz. And see if you can identify the spiritual theme within each one of them. Thank you, Angela, for lighting the chalice, and Alex will read the first one.
Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense.
Come to the orchard in spring. There is light and wine and sweethearts and the pomegranate flowers. If you do not come, these do not matter. If you do come, these do not matter.
I, you, he, she, we. In the garden of mystic lovers, these are not true distinctions.
Take a deep breath as you take these in. Our first hymn this morning is number 188, Come, Come Wherever You Are, found in the gray hymnal, and rise if you're willing and able.
In just a moment, I'm going to introduce our Time for All Ages, which is recorded today. But before we get to that, I wanted to introduce to you our new youth advisor, Jeff Jackson.
Thank you so much, Meredith. From the moment I stepped in here, you all have been so warm, so welcoming, and I really appreciate that. I've been in the community for over 15 years. I've worked with all types of youth, and I'm just so excited to be here, and I hope to get to know all of you, each and every one of you, and I'm just happy to be here. Thank you so much.
So the reason I wanted to introduce today's story today, well, there are a few reasons. One, usually I like to align my stories with the sermon topic for the day, but today is not going to be like that. It's a different type of story. And I'm sharing it with you today because I'm about to go on sabbatical, and I just could not leave you without sharing this wonderful story first. This book probably has the most diverse representation of families that I have ever seen in a children's book. And so as you watch it, I want you to take a close look at the pictures and see all the wonderful beauty in the diversity of humankind. And that's their family. Written by Kaylee Coleman. Illustrated by Jamie Malone. Some kids have 2 mommies. And some kids have 2 daddies. Some kids have 1 parent, and that's their family. Some kids live with grandmas, and some kids live with grandpas. Some kids were adopted, and that's their family. Some kids live with aunties, and some kids live with uncles. Some have foster families, and that's their family. Some kids have a stepdad, and some kids have a stepmom. Some kids live in group homes, and that's their family. Some kids live with sisters, and some kids live with brothers. Some have mommies and daddies, and that's their family. Some kids live with parents that don't feel like one gender. They are non-binary, and that's their family. Some kids have poly families. They may have lots of parents, so many people to love them, and that's their family. Some kids may have parents who live in different houses, 2 homes with people to love them, and that's their family. No matter what we look like, if our skin is dark or light, whatever language we speak, we love all equally. I wonder, what does your family look like?
Sunday school.
Once a month, we at First UU select an organization or cause to collect funds as part of our congregational outreach, and we call this Share the Plate. This month, an outreach is in InReach. As most of you know, we're called upon staff to do extra, I'm adding these, extra duties to help us through a very stressful time last year. As you know, the developmental minister, Alex, has hit the ground running and is already leading us through several of the developmental goals that we established as a congregation last spring. Because of the efforts of all of our staff, the future looks bright, and we'd like to show them our gratitude and appreciation. So, the funds that we collect this month will be used for staff bonuses as a token of our gratitude. If throughout the month you choose to make a donation online rather than the offering plate, please specify Share the Plate when you make the donation. If you choose to mail in a check, note in the little line, the memo line, Share the Plate. And if you're unable to make a financial donation at this time, consider sending a card or leaving a voicemail or just saying thank you the next time you run into any of the staff.
So Nick and Ramona are going to sing the song If I Loved You from Carousel, but they've asked me to sort of set a context for this. And the context is to consider the use of pronouns in this song. In fact, during the chalice lighting, I read the Shams of Tabriz poem, I, you, he, she, we, in the Garden of Mystic Lovers. These are not true distinctions. And so pronouns are actually an important part of our political dialogue these days, are they not? But they're also an important part of self-understanding and, from the spiritual perspective, a way of understanding our relationship with God. And so this song can be heard on many levels. But before they sing it, I wanted to share with you just a couple of quotations from a couple of Sufi teachers to sort of give you a sense of what I'm trying to say this morning. Al-Ghazali said, "A seeker went to ask a sage for guidance about the Sufi way. The sage counseled, 'If you have never trodden the path of love, go away and fall in love, then come back and see us.'" And as a footnote to that, the Sufi sage Jami said, "You may try 100 things, but love alone will release you from yourself. So never flee from love, not even love in an earthly guise, for earthly love is a preparation for the supreme truth."
If I loved you, time and again I would try to say all I'd want you to know. If I loved you, words wouldn't come in an easy way, round in circles I'd go.
I love you, words wouldn't come in an easy way, round in circles I'd go. Longing to tell you, but afraid and shy, I've let my golden
chances pass me by. Soon you'd leave me.
off you would go in the midst of day.
Never, never to know how I loved you. If I loved you. And I do.
So our reading this morning is by the Sufi teacher Meher Baba. It is called Wine and Love. Wine, by the way, is a Sufi metaphor for spiritual drunkenness. So they often talk about the tavern, and they talk about the wine bringer and drinking the dregs. But in Sufi parlance, this means God intoxication, basically. So Meher Baba on wine and love. The Sufi master poets often compared love with wine. Wine is the most fitting figure for love because both intoxicate. But while wine causes self-forgetfulness, love leads to self-realization. The behavior of the drunkard and the lover are similar. Each disregards the world's standard of conduct, and each is indifferent to the opinion of the world. But there are worlds of difference between the course and the goal of the two. The one leads to subterranean darkness and denial. The other gives wings to the soul for its flight to freedom. The drunkenness of the drunkard begins with a glass of wine, which elates his spirit and loosens his affections, giving him a new view of life that promises forgetfulness from the day's worries. But he goes on from a glass to 2 glasses, and then to the bottle. He goes on from companionship to isolation, from forgetfulness to oblivion. Oblivion, which in reality is the original state of God, but which, in the drunkard's case, is an empty stupor, not knowing whether he sleeps in a bed or a gutter. Then he awakens in a dawn of futility, an object of ridicule to the world. The lover's drunkenness begins with a drop of God's love, which makes him forget the world. The more he drinks, the closer he draws to the beloved, and the more unworthy he feels of the beloved's love. And he longs to sacrifice his very life at the beloved's feet. He too does not know whether he sleeps on a bed or in a gutter, also becoming an object of ridicule to the world. But he rests in bliss, and God the beloved takes care of his body. Neither the elements nor disease touch it. For such a lover, longing is infinite. The wine that he drinks turns into fire in which he continuously burns in blissful agony. It's a pretty intense path, that Sufism. Eventually, however, the fire becomes the ocean of infinite consciousness in which the lover drowns. He then sees God everywhere, in everything, and in everybody. So our next hymn this morning is one that we've done a couple times, so it will be familiar to most of you, but I'm going to give just a little direction. The words to this are in the order of service, and I wanted to print them here so that we can split the congregation down the middle, and you can actually sing to each other because it's a call and response hymn. So one side will sing, "All I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you." And then you pause. And then this side will sing that back. And then this side sings in Arabic, "Ishq Allah ma'abud lillah," which means basically God is love. And God should be the object of our devotion. So that's "Ishq Allah ma'abud lillah." So please rise as you're able, and we'll do this. Let's do it 4 times, and let's really let ourselves get into this. And if you're so willing, turn and face each other so that you can occasionally look up from your liner notes and actually look into each other's eyes when you sing. And let's hear it through one time, and then we'll join. I love that piece. That is a beautiful. I have what my friend Shuma used to say of me. She's from India, and so she used to say to me, "You have a mental habit of repetitive mantra," because I will play mantras, literally the same mantra for hours, and I can sing this song for hours. So I hope you appreciate it, at least half as much as I do. But I think the meaning of that song is the essence of what it means to be in relationship with each other. So when Mary and I lit the chalice this morning, or when Angela lit the chalice and Mary and I were reading, we shared 2 quatrains from Rumi and 1 poem from Shams of Tabriz, which you'd heard once or twice before. And Mary said, see if you can identify the common theme that runs through these poems. And so I'm wondering, did any of you identify a common theme in those poems? You didn't get much time to think about it, right? So now you get a little time to think about it, because I'm going to read them again. And the reason I'm going to read them again is because we're talking about the Sufi path today, and these 2 quatrains of Rumi and the poem by Shams of Tabriz beautifully articulate the higher state of consciousness toward which Sufis aspire and from which they hope to live. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. And again by Rumi, come to the orchard in spring. There is light and wine and sweethearts in the pomegranate flowers. If you do not come, these do not matter. If you do come, these do not matter. I, you, he, she, we. In the garden of mystic lovers, these are not true distinctions. I, you, he, she, we. In the garden of mystic lovers, these are not true distinctions. So what Rumi is getting to in these 2 quatrains, and what Shams is also expressing in his poem, is something I referred to a couple of months ago when I was talking about Jesus, actually. And I was talking about Jesus. His ministry was really calling us or inviting us through his stories and his parables and his teachings into a state of consciousness from which we can look out into the world and see it with different eyes. And those different eyes, I said, were Advaita, or the oneness of all that is. The non-dual as opposed to the dual. And if you read Jesus from the perspective of having attained the state of consciousness of the non-dual, his teachings mean something very different than what they mean if you hear them through a dualistic lens or set of ears. Because Jesus would also agree, I, you, he, she, we, in the garden of mystic lovers, these are not true distinctions. Because all is one. There is only one. From the spiritual state of consciousness, it is just one. Dualistic language makes no sense. So you can read Jesus that way, and you can read the yogis that way, and you can read the Buddha that way, and you can certainly read the Sufis that way. And this was paramount to their teaching. It is what they were striving for. And if you get into Sufi poetry, and after the holidays you're going to get a lot of it, you will hear this over and over and over again. So thinking about these poems again from the state of Advaita, or the spiritual consciousness that sees all as one. When Rumi says, out be ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field, I will meet you there. He's saying, if you leave your perspective of dualism, there is a state of consciousness, there is a field, metaphorically, that we can inhabit, in which our differences melt away and we realize our union with each other. So the concept of right doing and wrongdoing is dualistic. And Rumi says, beyond that, beyond the notion of even your ethics and your morals, there is a state of consciousness we can occupy in which we realize it's all one. And I don't have time to elaborate on all of these today. But I could talk a long time about the fact that that state of consciousness, that field where we meet, where we see that all is one, it is love. And the path to it is love. Because it is love that obliterates all distinctions and into which we enter. Jesus talked about the wedding feast. That's what he meant. You remember the parable of the wedding feast? You know, the person gets invited to a wedding but gets kicked out because they were not ready for the experience of the union of the lover and the beloved. That's what that's about. Same thing. All right, so I've got 4 of these today. I got to edit myself in real time so we can get out on time today. Each one of these is a sermon of its own. And if you are really interested in any of the themes I share this morning, let me know. And I can evolve them and go much deeper and broader into the teaching. So I was listening to some folks a few weeks ago talking about the fact that here comes another political season. And if there's anything that grounds you in your dualistic perspective, it's politics. You have Republicans and you have Democrats. And you have third parties going, there's another option. It's one example of the many ways in which we look at the world and we see difference. And we see difference everywhere. We see difference everywhere. And so I kind of listen to people talk through this lens of how dualistic is this conversation versus how much does this conversation attempt to help us see the unity of all that is. And politics is always about difference. It's always about dualism. And then the conversation progressed, and I'm not sharing my own bias here, but somebody said, oh, Trump's going to run again. And it's going to be Biden and Trump all over again. I'm so sick of this. And I said, well, it is what is. And you can spend your time being sick and frustrated and generating all this negative emotional energy in you and living inside that skin. Or you can adopt a different perspective that will help you be free within your own skin in the midst of all this. Yeah, I tried, but that Trump, which I know is the position of a lot of liberals. And that Biden, and that Kamala Harris, and that AOC, or whatever, Alexandria, the right doesn't like them. We're so locked into this perspective. So we talked a little bit more, and somebody looked at me and said, I just can't get past Trump. And I said, I hear that a lot. And the thing we need to pay attention to in our reactions to situations, to our reactions to our perspectives on the world, what does that generate within us? It generates the conviction of difference, the conviction of otherness, the conviction of better than or worse than. And it treats us to take division as natural. And so I said to this person, you know, I often get asked by liberals in my congregations, well, you sound like you might like Trump. No, it's not that I necessarily like Trump, but I'm not going to spend the precious time I have in this incarnation living in the negative emotional states that I can allow that to create in me. So I just choose to try to see Trump through a different lens. I said, in fact, I'd love it if Donald Trump walked into this congregation. And they said, what kind of liberal are you? I'm paraphrasing, but that was basically the message. And then I said, if Donald Trump is going to attend church somewhere on a Sunday morning, who do you want him listening to? The church is for scoundrels, even those with a capital S. So that's my way of saying I tried to view Trump through a different lens. And I tried to view everything that I see as different or divisive or problematic through a different lens. And so as I was listening to this conversation and trying to participate in it and losing some political credibility in the attempt, this thought about one of Rumi's poems has one line in it that is a real zinger. And if you really let this line in, it can flip your whole script about the way you perceive such matters in the world. And it's not just politics, you know, it's morality, it's race, it's gender identification, it's sexual orientation, all of these dualistic things that separate us. With this one line in a Rumi poem, he flipped my script. And I've always been pretty conscious of it most of the time when I encounter situations and conversations like this. And Rumi said, only a love without object is true love. Only a love without object is true love. Who can commit to such a love? They are so rare, those hearts that carry the blessing and lavish it over everything. Those hearts that carry the blessing and lavish it over everything. Every situation, everybody. And so what Rumi's saying there, only love without true object is true love, he's again invoking this difference between the dualistic world of I and other and this Advaitic or unified perspective that all is one. See, love with an object is language that makes sense in the dualistic world. I love my dog because of the way the dog makes me feel when I'm with my dog. And I love my wife because of the way my wife makes me feel when I'm with my wife. And I love my son because of the way my son makes me feel when I'm with my son. And I love this congregation because of the way I feel when I'm with this congregation. It's all objective love. Subject, object, which is conditional love. Why is subject-object love conditional? Well, think about it for a minute. Pick somebody or some thing, some situation in your life that you really love. Like, go in your mind or your heart and go, I so much love this person, or I so much love this situation. And ask yourself, why do you love that person or situation so much? And the answer will be some iteration of because of the way I feel when I am with this person or in this situation. which means the way you feel is dependent on other. What happens if the person you love so much stops requiting, and over time you're just not getting the hits coming back? Your love will diminish. Or if you're in a situation, the same holds true. Things just are different than they used to be. I just don't feel the verve anymore. That's love with object. Love without object is an entirely different matter. It's that state of consciousness the Sufis talk so much about. It's that state of consciousness where you realize that the love that you think is dependent on everything in the world that attracts you and fulfills you is a lesser version of the love that you already carry within you. And if you can discover the love that you carry within you, and this is a lot of what the Sufi work is about and why they talk so much about love. If you can discover the love that you carry within you, you will simply act from that love. It will not be dependent on your response to an other. That's the difference. It's love as a state of being from which I act because I know myself as love, and I don't need an object, versus the conditional love. That is really how we operate in the world. So let me bring this back around to how I began this little part of the sermon. The next time you hear the name Trump, think about what it does to you. And think about Rumi's poem. And take a moment and go inward and ask yourself if you can see the person or the situation through a different lens. Now, the rest of this sermon, which I won't give today, is this: because those people, those scoundrels with a capital S that make our lives so difficult and with which we struggle so much, and we wish they were otherwise, there's only one way they're going to become otherwise in your orbit, and that's if you act toward them from love. That's how you bring transformation to the lives of other people. And the greater the scoundrel, the greater the love. Because that changes the scoundrel's playing field and makes them recalculate how they're showing up in the world. You can write the rest of that one at lunch. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. So, there was he passed a few years back, a man named Robin Amos, who was a frequent pilgrim to Mount Athos in Greece. And Mount Athos in Greece is, quote unquote, the holy mountain where the Greek Orthodox contemplatives live. They've got like 140 some square miles of monasteries and everything. And they are the ones who are the containers of the great spiritual wisdom of the Desert Fathers, which is a profound spiritual teaching that for the most part has been lost to the world, except these monks preserve it. And so Robin Amos got permission from them. You have to get permission to go on pilgrimage to the holy mountain. And he went many, many times and got to know them so well that they actually gave him permission to write about Mount Athos and their practices and their theology and their spirituality. And so he wrote a book called A Different Christianity. And I say to people, and I mean this, if I had discovered this book when I was 25 years old, I would not be a Unitarian Universalist today, because it was such a compelling take on Christianity, so different, so compelling, and so rich, that I probably would have gone off on the Eastern Orthodox path. But I'm glad I didn't, because now I'm with a bunch of you who've never heard of the book, and I get to share it with you all. Anyway, I connected with Robin about a year and a half before he passed away. And I got to attend a few webinars with him, and I got to attend a few of his study groups. But he passed away pretty quickly. But one of the things he said early on when I discovered him was, he said, the test of the spiritual life is not about correct belief, getting it right. The test of the spiritual life is about the transformation of being. In other words, if you're on a spiritual path, it doesn't matter whether you're a Sufi or Greek Orthodox or Unitarian Universalist or Hindu or pagan, whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. What matters is this path helping you in the transformation of your being? That's the real litmus test. In other words, when you walk a path, are you less of a scoundrel today than when you were yesterday? That's how I interpret that. And I think that's a very powerful test of spirituality. And I think that most people don't think about spirituality in these terms. But I think we need to begin to help people think about spirituality in these terms. For instance, is your spiritual life simply a roll of the dice that you might believe correctly and get yourself into heaven when the time comes? Because that's what it is for a lot of people. Or is it supposed to mean something for you as you trod this earth between the day you're born and the day you die? And what is it supposed to mean for you while you trod this earth between the day you're born and the day you die? Well, hopefully, it helps the transformation of your being so that you just become a better scoundrel. That you hopefully will reach a place where you don't feel the need to escape the experience of living in your own skin. You can actually live in your own skin and be perfectly content. That's another version of transformation. So the way the Sufis talk about this, there's a traditional saying in Sufism: a donkey with a load of holy books is still a donkey. A donkey with a load of holy books is still a donkey. The poet Kabir said, if saying Ram brought liberation, or Ram, one of the Hindu gods, if saying Ram brought liberation, if saying fire burned your feet, if saying water quenched your thirst, if saying food banished hunger, the whole world would be free. In other words, the teachings have to be integrated into your being so that they can work the power of transformation and change your life. You can't just invoke the name of God and have that experience. You can't just recite mantras over and over again and have that experience. There's spiritual wisdom contained in the traditions, and you have to take those in and work with them psychodynamically. In other words, you have to see how they operate and inform you about your experience of being you in the world and help you become otherwise. That's what changes a person. So we don't want to just be donkeys with loads of holy books. We want to take the wisdom contained in them and work with them toward the end of transformation of being so that we can be a more loving presence in the world. All right, one more. Jesus, upon whom be peace. Actually, many Sufis actually consider Jesus the perfect Sufi. Jesus, upon whom be peace, saw the world revealed in the form of an ugly old hag. And he asked her, how many husbands have you possessed? And she replied, I have had countless husbands. And he asked her whether they had been killed or had died perhaps, or did you divorce them? What has happened with all your husbands? And she said, I have slain them all. And Jesus said, I marvel at the fools who see what you have done to others, yet still desire you. I marvel at the fools that see what you have done to others, but still desire you. Does that story remind you of something you might have heard from me before? Maybe a story about the difference between the world and the spiritual, between God and mammon, between instinctual gratification that holds you, that imprisons you, versus being free and living from a higher state of spiritual consciousness. I love that story. People always like that story when I share it, but I'm amazed how it doesn't seem to free us very well, does it? Because the stories aren't enough. Just knowing the story means you're a donkey with a holy story. But when you begin to take the story in and work with it, which means as you go about your business, look at your behavior. Look at your mental patterns. Look at what binds you emotionally. And you're going to find out how incredibly tight you are held by the world. And that's what the old hag means when she says, I've slain them all. That means people have lived at the level of instinctual gratification only. And Jesus says, I marvel at those fools. When will we learn that there's a better way of being and operating and participating in the world? When will we learn, as the Sufis teach, to reach for and try to attain that state of spiritual consciousness of which they speak? Because the world looks incredibly different, folks, from that state of consciousness. And your experience of yourself is incredibly different from that state of consciousness. And the dynamic between you and the world radically changes. And you will no longer be susceptible to the world and all her wiles. So it's a very steep path, this Sufi path. It's a very steep path. I'm going to start actually doing quarterly online studies about this. So if you're interested and you want to sign up for these, send me a note and we'll get it going after the holidays. All right, enough of that. Would you, Jera, please share with us?
Before we extinguish our chalice, if we take a deep breath, let the beauty that we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. And as we extinguish our chalice, let us keep in mind the beloved son of Dick and Linda, Tim, and all the beloveds that we carry in our hearts with us. We extinguish this chalice, and we're not doing that anymore. We're just doing it in our heart.